folks, welcome to the No Apologies channel, and tonight I'm here with Dr. Harvey. Howdy, Harvey.
Good day. Good
day, good night, good evening, and so long. And no Steve, he's AWOL at the moment. Well, he's allowed to have leave. He's MIA. So it's just Phil and Harvey tonight. It's great to see you all here. Not that we can see you, but it's a hot topic.
MIA means Maestro.
Oh, that's us, Maestro in absentia. Bye-bye, Steve. You genius from the land of, well, I was going to say Chopin, but maybe, maybe Mozart. Beethoven, Mozart, just a couple of the lackeys. Anyway, that's right. But the Shroud of Turin. Now, this is going to be quite interesting for me because the Shroud has been on the periphery, like I guess for many Christians, it's been on the periphery of my Christian life ever since I was and became. Like, it's been one of those things that has come and gone in interest and popularity. And Navi, you've got a bit of study that you're doing at the moment. I might just dip into that a little bit, but not take too long because I want to get to the first of these clips. But what you wrapped up your profession and your business not so long ago, and the first big thing you've sunk your teeth into is a study on the Shroud.
That's right. There is an Institute of Science and Faith, which is part of the Vatican and the University in Rome.
And are you Roman Catholic?
No.
So, see, anyone can study there.
They encourage anyone who has an interest in studying the Shroud to sign up for the course. It's a year long and it's very detailed. So we go into not only some of the aspects of the Shroud's history, its theological depth and implications and meaning.
Okay.
The scientific studies that have been the subject of investigation, and they have accumulated enormous amount of investigation in the most.
Imagine as a surgeon, right? You're very much your profession should be based on empirical science.
Yes.
And so I'm imagining that the science aspect of this would be fascinating for you to be looking into. Do you feel like you're getting your teeth into it? Is it wetting your whistle?
Very much so. The investigations that have been done in 102 disciplines, from numismatics to mathematics to theoretical physics to nuclear physics to textile mechanics to non-destructive testing of aging to radiocarbon dating to history of art and artistic technique.
They've really put this through the ringer, haven't they?
102 different
disciplines,
600,000 hours, and hundreds of thousands of words written about it from the various
across those disciplines. I imagine, and I'll just push into this last little bit before I play the first clip because people want to hear us responding to what's going on. I'm assuming that's why you're here. Welcome that you're here. Please do like the video and subscribe and all that sort of stuff and share it. Leave us your comments and all that sort of hoo-ha. Actually, that's a great Australian phrase, all that hoo-ha. But any cross-disciplinary meta-studies that have tried to bring those cross-disciplines together at some point? If you come across any of those?
There's much collaboration between people who are involved with optics, people who are involved with art, and a scientific research team comprised of 33, some people say 40 scientists, gathered from America in 1978, the STORP project, which is the Shroud of Turin research project. And they planned what they were going to actually do. They had 120 uninterrupted hours continuous exposure to the Shroud, which was very carefully planned out. They did a dry run beforehand, and they took all sorts of imaging sampling that they possibly could, and a tiny piece of cloth for radiocarbon dating. There's a lot of discrepancies about that. Essentially, the cloth is purported to be the burial cloth of Jesus of Nazareth.
Yeah, and that was my point, that I was actually having thoughts running through my brain saying, you forgot to introduce the actual purpose. I've gone in with an assumption that everybody would know if they clicked on this what it would be that we're talking about. So again, it's purported to be the burial cloth of Jesus after his crucifixion and through his resurrection as well.
Well, that's the big controversy. The cloth
Is
has,
it or isn't it, and all that sort of stuff.
Well, in
Which
many
we'll get
people's
to.
opinions, scientists included, there's, in their opinion, indisputable evidence that in fact it's a true relic and has come originally from the grave where Jesus.
Well, these things are
rose from
there.
the dead.
I'm not a big
But there's
fan
a lot
of that.
There's a lot of controversy about
course.
it and a lot of opinions. One might say not necessarily all laced with scientific endeavour, but with a desire to see the thing debunked, because the implications are stark. If this is indeed the burial cloth of Jesus of Nazareth, and it contains evidence of his horrible crucifixion, scourging, crown of thorns, his death, and then his resurrection, then it adds an extremely powerful physical link to the things Christians have accepted.
So it's
by
like
faith over this millennium.
archaeology on steroids to some degree.
Absolutely. It's
More
the
than a coin.
It's the most studied artifact in all of history.
Well, let's get into it then. These are, folks, just some, I won't say random, but they are not, the clips we're about to see are clips that are put out in full. Again, we're not doing a taking out the trash on this one right now. We're doing a bit more of a response to these different videos. And we just grabbed them from a variety of publishers and things that people will know. So from Gary Habermas to Tucker Carlson and folks like that. And I might have even got Russell Crowe in there, I'm not sure. But we'll see what happens. Maybe not Russell Crowe, maybe some Mel Gibson. We'll see. A couple of Australian actors one way or another, because we do like Australian actors here in Australia.
We do.
So first clip.
What's the Shroud of Turin?
The Shroud of Turin is believed to be the actual burial cloth of Jesus of Nazareth.
You're saying that this cloth represented right here, 1-to-1, covered Jesus's body.
The historical Jesus, and it's not a death cloth. I actually believe it's a resurrection cloth.
Resurrection cloth.
What it has embedded in it, the image of a crucified man that has complete correspondence with what we know of crucifixion in the Roman Empire, specifically as it relates to Jesus of Nazareth.
What image is on this cloth?
This is an image of a bearded man, a strong man, a muscular man.
Okay, but of the hundreds or thousands of shrouds like this that exist, why do we think this one has an image of Jesus on it?
Because all of it matches the way in which Jesus was crucified.
So any comments on that one, Harvey?
Yes, that's an interview of Tucker Carlson with Dr. Jeremiah Johnson, who studied at Oxford, did his PhD, wrote a book called The Body of Proof.
Oh, okay.
And, he had extensively investigated the shroud from virtually every single aspect.
So in your study, has he come up in your studies as an author?
He's a fairly recent newcomer to the growing number of theologians who've been interested in the shroud. He's not a scientist, from what I understand. He did his doctorate in Oxford, with a particular interest in the resurrection of Jesus.
Okay.
So one may be forgiven for recognizing that everybody that comes to study the shroud comes with some degree of baggage. They have some bias towards it.
How could we not?
They would have heard of Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
They would have heard of artifacts.
Yeah.
They will know about relics. They will know about frauds. The more they've read about relics that the church has provided for centuries.
Let me just pick a question
how
in.
many have been fake.
Yes. Okay.
But
So
it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean all are fake. Certainly some may have been.
how are you defining the use of that term relic? Now, I came across. Well, I mean, relics in movies, they're pop culture things. What's the difference between a relic and an artifact?
Well, the official definition of relic must have some body part of the person or the saint.
Right.
From whom it's purported to have come.
So it's my ignorance there, folks. I didn't know relics meant that.
The reason why this is a relic is because it has blood on it. and it's human blood, and that's been tested and verified independently. And the type is AB, which is one of the types of blood type. It's rare actually in Europe and in Americas, but quite common in the Middle East. It's male blood, so we do know there were fragments of Y chromosomes that have been identified in it, and other features of human blood that we have identified. There is a cross-reactivity with some genuses, some species, cats and monkeys. So it does leave a small window of misinterpretation that if someone tried to forge this and pass it off as a fake and pass it off as an original, then they would have had to have acquired that blood. But given the rest of the features, it would appear the volume of blood they would have had to have used, and the way it's been distributed, it almost certainly would have had to be the death of another human, which is intriguing.
Wow, that
Why
does
would they
leave it
have
right
gone
open, doesn't it?
To that length to fake.
Why would you do that?
Well,
I mean, I know
reason-
why people do it, money
Yeah.
and
Well,
or prestige.
And there is evidence that relics were faked and then shown to the faithful so that they
Sure.
would cough up cash to build churches, build
Yeah,
empires, and build bishops' lodges. And that's not to say that this hasn't happened. We're all aware of that. But following this particular artifact and the Sudarium of Oviedo, which we could talk about as well, these are two artifacts that were preserved from the crucifixion and resurrection, and then in the early church transported it through Asia Minor, the Sudarium through North Africa, ending up in Spain, but the shroud going through Edessa in southern Turkey.
Where do we first track it from? From Odessa?
Well, the first defendable and known historical evidence of it is in 1353 in a small chapel in Liry, which is a small town in France, about 30 miles away from Troyes, which is a bigger city. And it was the private ownership of a well-known family, the Descharnets.
Okay.
And Geoffrey Descharnet was the one who had custody of it and revealed it to the public that he had it, I think, in the late 1340s, but displayed it in.
And what was his story then?
He was a very well-known knight who supported
Crusader?
No, he wasn't a crusader, but he was a knight who had jurisdiction over an area and a castle in France, who was loyal to the king, and in fact who ended up taking the bullet for the king.
Wow.
And was very highly thought of. The shroud passed to his widow, Margaret, and subsequently she remarried, but the shroud was still in her possession, and ultimately she gifted it to the King of Savoy because of some close marital relations with their families for safekeeping, and in fact as a custodian. The Savoyers then had it from the 1400s through until they relocated to where the Savoyers are currently, and that's in Turin, in northern Italy.
Hence the Shroud of. So
And
with
that's
the original,
the shroud is there.
with the original most traceable spot back to the, you said 1350s.
Yes. Well,
what was his story? Yeah, the prior to.
Yeah.
What's the story of the journey to get there? Because
prior to that, there's oblique evidences to an image not made by human hands, or acheiroptinos, which is an image not made by human hands, which is reported by as early as Eusebius of Caesarea in 325 AD.
Really?
There are legends written in the history of Armenia by Moses Koronatsi, written in Armenian, about a shroud that was, or an image of Jesus that was shown to a king at the time of Jesus by the name of King Abgar. And this was brought he sent letters to Jesus, and Jesus sent word back to him saying, I can't come, I'm actually was about to be crucified, but I'll be sending one of my apostles, Thaddeus, who will come and show you an image and your leprosy will be cured. That apparently happened. Abgar then corresponded with Tiberius, the then Caesar in Rome, who was aware of it, but wouldn't acknowledge that Jesus was God because he had to bring it to the Senate to confirm that. Tiberius then died, the despotic emperors took over. The image that was brought to Abgar is not possibly the image from the Shroud.
Sure.
The Shroud is believed to have gone through Antioch and then to possibly Ephesus, then back to Jerusalem, and then possibly to
So
Edessa.
it's that sort of
1940,
very
until
opaque.
1944, and then was transported to Constantinople until the sack of Constantinople in 1204, and was taken by a Robert Cleary, who took it and then entrusted it to Othon de la Roche, who was a knight who was given the governance of Athens, and it was kept there for a while before it was taken to his home in France and found its way through to the Deschanets, because
where it
Margaret
really has its...
Margaret was a great-granddaughter of the original Othon de la Roche.
Okay.
So there's oblique links historically to it, not absolutely sure, but in the great land of archaeology, to be absolutely 100% sure of things is not so easy.
Yeah, I wouldn't think there would be. Well, let's watch this next clip.
These guys know about the Shroud quite a bit. Now, you believe it's authentic, don't you?
I believe it's authentic, but not like I believe the resurrection's authentic. Shroud guys, when I do interviews on the subject, because I'm asked to do interviews on it, they get a little angry with me because my percentage is a little bit low. I frequently say, on the Shroud, I feel like I'm about like 80% sure, but then I tell them if you get an 80% of one of my tests, you're going to flunk. So that's not the best percentage in the world. Because you know why? Because I leave room for this. If a fake comes up tomorrow, I've got to deal with that. And if the Shroud is a fake, so be it. The Shroud is a fake. And I'm going to make enemies for saying that. But I call it an empirical object, so therefore it is judged by empiricism. But there's a lot of reason to think the man buried in the Shroud was... A scorch made the mark on the cloth, and this man was crucified. Now, you could say it was somebody else. You could say it was fake. That's your business. You can go where you want.
Well, Gary Habermas, obviously a man we both respect tremendously. Looking at it just from that empirical attitude or perspective, similar take to you. How are you viewing?
His understanding of the resurrection is, of course, legendary, and there are things to know about Jesus and about Jesus' life. His death by crucifixion.
His magnum opus is like this big, Gary Habermas.
He has 14 absolute givens in history.
That's right.
In the documentation of these events of Jesus' life that we know for 100% sure. Now the question is, so he did rise from the dead. Is this cloth linked to it? And I would agree with him. There's got to be some degree of caution, because
I think so.
Because of this, because relics are a business.
Well, it's a thing, right?
And it is a thing that could well link it.
What I mean by
the
that...
question is, what evidence is there on that thing that could account for its presence? That's the key.
Well, so to me, I find these discussions really interesting. First of all, because the church and Christianity doesn't need the Shroud. It does need the resurrection, and it does need the scriptures, because that's how God says this is in the scriptures. This is sufficient for us and for our faith, and to live a life of godliness. Scriptures are enough. Why do we need anything else? It's another question. I don't need us to get into that right now. That people will have their various reasons, and I can understand someone like Gary Habermas who's gone, the resurrection, 100%, unquestionable, here's the data. The Shroud, not so sure. Like, he's very happy with it in a lot of ways. He's intrigued by it. He treats it as an empirical piece, and I think quite rightly scientifically, because his faith doesn't rest on the Shroud. And if you put your faith in something like that, and it's a doodad, and it turns out somehow, and we'll get into more of that later on about how undoodaddy it is, but you know, there's wisdom in saying this is just a thing. It's just a doodad. It's a spare bit of architecture. I don't need to have faith in it. It'll be very interesting if it is true and it is what it says it is. That's only positive, but it's not an essential part of faith. I kind of like that.
It's important to consider this, that the facts of the resurrection, the historical suffering of Jesus, his death by crucifixion at the hand of Pontius Pilate, his dying and being laid in a tomb by Nicodemus and Joseph of Arimathea, and his rising from the dead, and the absence of the empty tomb, and then the subsequent appearances to the rest of the apostles and people, and his ascension into heaven. Those are givens by faith, long before we had the shroud. The shroud will either augment that, or it will be proven not to be consistent with those facts.
So the good thing I like about it is that it's not trying to prove anything counter or contrary to Scripture.
Some people are attempting to use the shroud as a reason to disbelieve the scriptural.
How so? I would have thought it's meant to be the
and that's the most difficult
fingerprint of God.
The recent Shroud conference, which was held in St. Louis,
did you miss that?
Missouri,
you missed it, didn't you?
In England, in the United States, had about 45 lectures done by very prominent and eminent people, each in their area of speciality, at the cutting edge of their research, presenting the information as carefully as they can and taking questions afterwards. So you can look for the Shroud of Turin Conference 2025 in July at Augustine's in St. Louis in Missouri, and have a look at the presentations to see what people have done and what level of expertise they possess. There are Paolo de Lazzaro, for example, who is the Exheimer laser expert, looking at the production of laser light and its effect on ancient flax to cause the discoloration which we see on the shroud, and how much power it would take, how long to expose that power, and that is how the browning, or the image that you can see on the shroud, which is only 0.2 microns thick and only on the outside covers of each of the individual fibrils. It doesn't penetrate the cloth. It is only on the cloth that was in direct contact or very close to the body. And if there was blood on the cloth, then there's no image behind the blood, which suggests that if a forger was going to do this, he would have to first either paint or apply the image. The STOPE project, which I mentioned before, came to a very clear conclusion, 33 scientists. There is no evidence that this is a work of art of man.
No.
There's no brush strokes, there's no pigment, there's no paint, there's no photographic
It's an imbued
material.
image.
This is an image that is formed by some form that we do not know. That was in 1978. They came out with it, they published it in 1982 and 1981. The carbon dating, we can talk about that in detail.
Yeah, we might get to that.
But there's other things. So who is this man? It's of a crucified man, there's no doubt. He's about 5'11". He's in a crouched rigor mortis position. One shoulder is lower than the other. At the back, there's abrasions on the shoulder, in keeping with carrying a patibulum of a cross. There's scourge wounds that look like they come from two different height and different strength whippers. The whips they used were in three. There were three per thong, and because you can see the stripes on the flesh of the man because of the wounds that you can see on the shroud.
Quite amazing.
You can see the puncture wounds in the head. There are up to 50 puncture wounds in the head that go deep into the scalp down to the bone. That would obviously suggest multiple puncture wounds of something on the head.
Yeah.
Again, it lines up with the scriptural crown of thorns, which is more like a helmet of thorns, not just a crown. And there's all sorts of theological reasons why it would be a helmet, not like a wreath, like an olive wreath when you win at the Olympics.
Yeah.
There are crucifixion wounds of nails through the wrists, not the hands.
Yes.
Most artistic depictions of crucified Jesus had
Have
nails
the hands
through
and
the
the
palms.
palms. They would obviously, clearly, even a mug like me knows that wouldn't hold body weight.
It wouldn't. And Pierre Barbet, who was a surgeon who wrote a book called The Doctor at Calvary, has shown with cadavers, freshly dead people, nailed up to a cross, within 10 minutes, the weight of the body has pulled through the flesh.
It's a very interesting methodology and study.
Well, that's right.
How
So-
did he get that through ethics at uni?
Well, in 1929, you don't.
You didn't have to, did you? You just
I'm a
didn't.
surgeon. I will do what I like.
Does
So,
a man
not
pass
anymore.
me Charlotte?
So the nail marks in his wrist have to go through a space in between the bones of the wrist to be able to sustain the weight of the body.
Yeah, of
The
course.
space of Destotes, Destotes. And unfortunately, right in the front of that space is a median nerve. And if anyone has been injured in the median nerve, they will know with carpal tunnel syndrome the amount of extreme pain. And if you had a spike driven through it, it causes a spasm with the thumb adducting across the
yes,
palm.
and you see
That's
that.
why if you have a look at the shroud image, there are fingers but
Well,
no thumbs.
those are actually, I think those things are brought up in further videos, which would be
That's
good to
good.
look at that. So
And there's nail prints in the feet and a spear print in the side, which is between the
They're
fifth
all
and sixth
very
intercostal space. So
documented.
Yves Delage, who is a lawyer, who was asked to comment on the photographs which were taken of us by a lawyer by the name of Secondo Pia. He is an atheist, and he wished to present the findings, his assessment, that this must be of Jesus, and he's an atheist. But the Academy rejected his paper to present. They wanted to expunge all the details about Jesus out of it. And Yves Delage said, no, how can I do that?
That's clearly who it is.
It is, absolutely.
According to him.
It's really who it is.
So-
And
so you
he
would
said
think
there's a 1
then-
in a 200 billion chance
He
that
has-
it's not him.
He would have. See, and I would see that, and I'll move on to the next video after this, but you would think that someone from a counter point of view who dogmatically would or should be using just evidence to prove their case the other way, when they say, well, no, actually, it's him, you know, there's a level of credulity that comes with that. Not
right.
incredulity, but credulity. Someone's like, no, I wanted to prove that this wasn't, and I've actually proven that it is this guy, according to this story, that I don't believe he's God, but he's a man. So, interesting.
The other anatomical features which are important to note
Okay.
is the his dislocated tip of the nose from a blow on his right cheek, almost probably closing the right eye, but causing swelling on the cheek,
Yeah.
which is visible, and in keeping with Jesus being struck with reeds or sticks by the soldiers who mocked him. They were the ones who put the crown of thorns on his head, dressed him in a robe. They took off his own clothes and then dressed him in the robe. And then this was perhaps after the flogging or before, we're not quite sure.
Sure.
But the wounds were inflicted before the crucifixion.
Yeah, wow. Okay.
And the crown was taken off because then he was given his own clothes back.
Yeah, put into that.
You couldn't put the clothes back on if the crown was still on his head.
Yeah. And anyway, you get to those clothes later. It's interesting that... Anyway, I'll move on from that because I think there's some other things to
Sure.
respond to here. But anyway, folks, thanks for sticking with us with this. I hope you're finding it interesting and as fascinating as I am. It's quite a bit of noise at the moment out there. The Shroud of Turin has come floating back into the modern Western and Eastern psyche very prominently. So enjoy the ride.
The image on the shroud. This, as we'll see, is the most unique image in the history of all artifacts in the entire world for all time. It has undergone more scientific testing, and it has like 123 different tests. That testing has all been absolutely 100% positive. But here's the deal. That image has to be produced by a tremendous burst of light. And that would be in the order of about 6 to 8 billion watts of magnitude. That's with a B, billion, like a 500,000 searchlights worth of light energy emanating from every three-dimensional point in this man's body. That's, by the way, highly unusual for corpses to do. And so for all intents and purposes, we've got really a testimony to a miracle.
Okay, Harvey. So obviously, you know, the music's a little bit dramatic. We're getting people's own videos, and they come with their own bit of high drama there. But in response to that seems like a pretty straightforward, isn't this interesting, factual presentation. There's a lot of light. We can see the image here. It's the most unique image in all of human history, likely before and afterwards as well. We don't know how it was made. How does that resonate with you and what you've been studying, and how does that zing?
The concern we've got is that we don't know the bridge between what we think is a supernatural, producing natural effects, which are what we're investigating. We're investigating a natural thing. We've got a flax cloth, which is 14 feet by 3.5 feet. It is 0.38 millimeters thick. That's extremely
thin.
It has a complicated
It's linen.
herringbone weave, which may have come from the east, from Persia, could have been purchased from there. They made them in India, and there are some similar type of high quality cloths elsewhere in burial sites, including Masada. So we've got some evidence of the weave and its wide angle X-ray scattering analysis. Interestingly enough, the light that would discolor the superficial fibrils of each of those threads. Now each thread is about 200 fibrils. They're thinner than a human hair. And the coloring, the discoloration of the cellulose and hemicellulose, which constitute the cell walls of the flax, which is part of the fiber that makes up the cloth, it only browns or changes the very outside of the cloth that was exposed to the body. The deeper fibrils aren't.
They're not touched.
So this is, you could scrape it off with a razor.
Wow.
The entire image you can scrape off with a razor.
Fascinating.
It doesn't penetrate through, the blood does, but the discoloration that we see, which when we take the photograph of it, we get that beautiful negative image.
Yes.
So the photograph is a positive imprint on the cloth. When we take a photograph of the photograph, we get a negative when we actually get the subject in clear detail, which is unheard of because photography was only invented in the late 1800s. So this couldn't be a medieval forgery by photography.
No, they wouldn't know what they were doing to do that. And even so, you imagine trying to make it happen now.
So Professor Paolo De Lazio of the EANA, which is the Excimer laser lab looking at non-destructive testing and laser production in northern Italy, has been experimenting this. Took 5 years to try and figure out what was the frequency of the light that could cause these changes on this linen. How pure did it have to be? Because if it's contaminated with any other sort of light, including some visible light or even heat, then a tremendous burst of that would incinerate the cloth.
I was about to say, this is such
would
fragile cloth.
It would have to be cold light.
And do you get such a thing, laser?
You do. Ultraviolet light is cold, and so between 295 and 400 nanometers is a range of ultraviolet called UVB.
Can you just stop just for a second?
And
can you just turn around a little bit? I'm trying to find where your external hard drive is, where you're keeping all of this information, Harvey, because I'm just like, how do you remember all of that? I can barely remember how people like their coffee.
No. Well, there's more to it than that, because
of course there is.
The
of course
amount
there
of
is.
power that Father Spitzer, who is in charge of the website of the Shroud of Turin website, with a number of very interesting articles on it. He's clearly an enthusiast. I am too.
Do you think?
Matter.
Really?
I am.
Never would have thought.
He's almost blind, but he's also a physicist. So he's got theological as well as scientific cred. Professor Paolo de Lazzaro has presented this in the Shroud of Turin conference in July, and it would be useful to go and investigate what he has to say with his slide projection, because
Phenomenal.
He puts a lot of facts out there. The volume of light had to be from an Excimer laser of ultraviolet, and it needed to be between 34 and I think 36 trillion watts, which is joules per second. But it could only be for a 40 billionth of a second in order to leave the imprint and discolor it without damaging the cloth. Now, he's done that with different lengths of exposure, and there are not enough lasers in the world to produce that amount of power.
Incredible.
To irradiate the entire cloth. It came in a dark tomb, it was guarded, it was sealed.
Again, this is the assuming that that's what it is, which I'm with.
That's correct. One's got to ask, where did this light come from?
Yes.
From a theological point of view, it's easy to say because God said, "Let there be light" at the beginning of the Bible, and Jesus says, "I am the light of the world," and he demonstrates the brilliance of light that can come from him at the Transfiguration on Mount Tabor in front of Peter, James, and John, and he predicts his death and his resurrection a number of times throughout the Gospels, and then does it. And would it not be like God to leave a selfie for us to look at all these years later?
Funny you should say that.
Go further on and say, if we look to the book of Revelation, and you see that in the new heavens and the new earth, the new Jerusalem, there is no need for sun or moon, it says in Revelations 22:12, for the glory of God will provide the light, and the Lamb is its lamp.
Yeah.
Who is the Lamb of God?
Well, Jesus,
Again,
of course,
the scriptures are quite clear. John the Baptist points to him. There's the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world.
When I look at that...
That would be the source of the light, the one who created the light in the first place.
It's quite stunning to think that the specificity of light that's required, the nature of it and the type of it, we still don't, if I've got this right, we still don't have the breadth of technology to replicate that yet with modern science. So if we can't do it now, what makes us think that someone...
a horrible replication of this. Certain ways of blasting light and radiation at a cloth has left it with images, but they're distorted and they're not as clear as the Shroud's image.
And the Shroud, as we know, can be dated back at the very latest to the 1350s.
Well, that's historically.
That's the historical provenance of that.
Being much
well,
older
and so I'll get to that. There are some other clips that bring that up that we can talk to as well.
Yeah, we're looking at things, for example,
like
the age of the flax.
Yes.
Which, compared to flax shrouds that were found in Masada, which was destroyed in 73 AD, I think it is. Yeah. And those had a loss of vanillin, which is an important component of flax, and there should be a certain amount left in the linen to give us an idea of what it can. It's kind of like carbon dating.
Yes.
A certain amount is lost over time.
Yeah, yeah. And so we're looking at the rate of decay and seeing what it should be.
Which is the wide-angle scattering. The tests that have been recently done, that tends to point to this being very much older, and in fact somewhere between 22 BC and 60 AD, which is a good window.
That's a very good window, actually.
As it's aged as well as known flax shrouds have aged of that era.
Isn't it very good that we've got this history of...
The other thing is that there's Jerusalem limestone, which is found in certain portions of the shroud, which covered the feet, the knees, and the nose. Nowhere else. Now you would have to, if you were going to forge it, you would have to get some of that specific dust Jerusalem limestone, which is found outside.
It's
of
very
Damascus Gate.
CSI at this level, isn't it? You know, when they're trying to find where was that body. Well, this only turns up at this part of the
That's
delta.
right. And there are investigations that have been done looking at the pollens and pollens that have been present, flowering at that time in Jerusalem, only that they found on the shroud. So you would need to get those pollens and put them there in order to fake
That's
it.
a lot
Plus pollens from Turkey, pollens from Constantinople.
Yes, the
and pollens
lineage of its journey.
from Greece, and then put them all together when you were forging it in France, which is what was alleged.
Ah, the French,
So
they're
this
such
would be-
copycats.
Well, copies were made of the shroud.
Of
There's
course,
one
of
in
course.
Besançon and another one called the Shroud of Aquata, which was created by laying the shroud upon the Shroud of Turin to try and get an image of it by the monks in Aquata. And so that's a known reproduction, but doesn't have the same qualities as the shroud itself.
Well, tell you what, let's look at the next one then, because some of the things you've brought up, of course, and because this is so fresh with you, and it's, you know, I've deliberately tickled your nerve because I wanted to be able to get into some of this a little bit.
Hopefully this is interesting for you. You must research this. Shroudofturin.com, shroudresearch.com has got all of the scientific studies. If you look at a researcher by the name of Professor Robert Rucker, he's a nuclear radiation physicist, engineer, and he has been studying the shroud with his discipline for the last 40 years and carefully documented all of his findings on his website. So that would be useful to go and look for. And research it. The more you research it, the more fascinated I think you'll be.
I'll tell you what we can do as well. You can follow through. Maybe you can send me an email after this with some links. But look down below. Harvey will prioritize a few web links for me, because while I'm editing, you can go ahead and give me just a list of top 10 or something, if there's that many. And go and do your own study. But as for now, let's watch this next video.
So in other words, God took the first selfie. Shroud of Turin is the most lied about artifact from antiquity. This is breaking news.
Okay.
We have something called waxis dating, wide angle X-ray scattering. So we have this, we know the date is sound, 8070 or so, right? And so they have that shroud sampling. And then they took a sample, a correct sample of the shroud, and they compared that using wide-angle X-ray scattering, and they see that there has been 2,000 years of degradation in the shroud fibrils of this fine linen garment, meaning it has been getting old for 2,000 years, not 700. Think about that variation. And if we had an ultraviolet light right now, there'd be a lot of fun, Glenn, because I could show you that the shroud, the number one substance on the shroud is blood. They test the blood. And again, if you're a forger, you're just going to use animal blood, right? Mm-hmm. And the blood comes back human blood. Guess what the blood type is? Type AB. Less than 3% of the world's population has type AB blood, and it is found primarily in the land of Israel.
That's nuts.
Exactly. It takes
and no one would have thought 700 years ago.
Right.
So how do you explain, or can we explain? I've always thought of the shroud, because it's a negative, as he is resurrected, it's just like a flash of light, of energy, that just imprints on this.
Yes.
Is there another explanation for this?
Again, another scientist, another school is given 5 years to study this. Just the amount of electromagnetic energy or even radiation it would take to produce an image on a shroud like this. We know that it happened in 1/40th of a billionth of a second.
Oh my gosh.
1/40th billionth of a second. And it took 34,000 trillion watts of energy emanating from the body in a flash of 1/40th of a billionth of a second to produce that image. So in other words, God took the first selfie. When the STURP team came out and they published their findings, they said, we cannot explain it. And listen carefully, no pigment, no dye, no paint, no oxidization from old paint, nothing. The best scientists from the Jet Propulsion Labs cannot tell us how there's an image in that cloth.
Okay, so Harvey, that is amazing stuff. Now, folks, just on that last video that we saw there, you'll see some cuts in there. That's how they published it. I didn't do any cutting of any kind from that myself as I was preparing it. So that's just off the Jeff Beck program by the looks of things. Harvey, had you seen that one before?
I have, yes.
Okay,
Jeremiah Johnson again, who's a very articulate...
I call him JJ.
Yeah, he's a very articulate exponent.
Can I just say something about him?
Yes, of course.
I love his hair. I'm having hair envy as mine is receding and moving away because of grandkids. Anyway, so sorry, over to you on this one because I'm more like an MC.
He's absolutely right. I'm looking currently at the wavelength of the...
Harvey is looking at his laptop going through slide after slide after slide.
Studies which showed cellulose and UV radiation responsible for the photolysis and the brown changes, similar to when you brown things in the microwave or brown them under a desktop oven or in an oven. The heat changes the surface of the food you are cooking and it goes brown. The browning of it is an effect of electromagnetic radiation causing chemical changes in the structure of the molecules which make up the structures you're going to eat. In this case, there's a flash of light that hits the shroud fibers and changes the chemical structure of the outside of them permanently, leaving a stain, a brownish stain. And they go from hemicellulose to chromophore, which is for those who are involved with polymer science. It's published in 1972, Cellulose 1, about exactly what kind of chemical changes can occur. And the conclusion is that there's a narrow range of laser parameters and temporal duration of a single laser pulse, which is incredibly short. There's a threshold effect, in other words, the color is permanent, and that's why we see it 2,000 years later. It's thousands of megawatts per square centimeter. That is a huge amount.
Come on, that's amazing.
For intensity values, the right range of values, the linen gets vaporized if it's too long or too hot. So one's got to be really careful with that. The results fit with the coloring process at temperatures well below 200 degrees as demanded of before singeing or burning was going to occur of this flimsy flax material. It's very, very thin, as you can imagine. But we have it, and it's lasted 2,000 years, or 1,300 years, or 700 years if you are a skeptic, and contains properties which we can investigate and are still in the process of doing. So very interesting that the red color of the blood stains is opaque to UV light. So when you shine ultraviolet light on it, it blocks it. So underneath the blood stains there isn't an image.
Isn't that amazing?
There's no change to the flax. Now you've got to ask, does a forger first paint the image and then splash blood on it, or splash blood on it and then try and paint the image around it?
You have to think of the method. You would have to.
There's no evidence of brush strokes.
Well, that's the thing when you come with a critique or a critical theory. You've actually got to not just bag something. You've got to come with the receipts of an alternate perspective, and the idea of someone. We've talked about this, so if you've come from a science background, you're pretty on board with what Harvey's talking. If you're just a normally sort of bloke like me, you would look at this and say, how do you reverse engineer that? How do you take that from zero to hero and think about what layer comes first, the chicken and the egg? How would you know that there shouldn't be an image there in the first place? But we know it's not brushed on, so the complexity, the technique, or the lack of technique
There's a broader picture too. If they only produced one, where's the evidence of the artist who could be named? You can just basically say, I made it up, I'm a fake. If it's a fake, I made it. Secondly, You might say, well, here's the other
And what an
attempt.
artist, first of all.
And why is it that every single
most-
we don't have another shroud? We don't have another shroud like it.
You
There's
did
no burial cloth like it. It doesn't have an imprint on it.
So this skill
and it
would have
doesn't
to
have all these details in it.
This skill would have had to have emerged fully formed, so it fits an evolutionary framework. It turns up fully formed with no progenitors and
No progenitors. Nobody has managed.
You can't
to
see
get
the
anything
development
like
of
that.
skill to get there anywhere, and there would be.
Very interestingly, too, if one goes back to the image that you see on the shroud, and Otangelo Grasso has done AI versions of reconstructing the features of Jesus as are embedded in the 3D information,
Yes.
which is on the shroud itself. And you can go to some of his work on Facebook, Otangelo Grasso, and it's beautifully done.
We might even get a link
he-
for that as well from Harvey, we'll see.
He has constructed a facial picture of what Jesus would look like while alive. And it's not breaking the second commandment of making a graven image, because it's not graven, it's basically taken from the shroud. So it's something that God's made, and we just...
Not something to worship, it's
No,
just
no,
something
no.
to...
And the shroud, on the shroud itself, if you actually go to Turin, to the Church of John the Baptist, the shroud is behind a metal case, and it's in an argon atmosphere, so that it doesn't oxidize any further and lose its characteristics. It's got there. This shroud is to be venerated, but not to be worshipped.
Yeah.
It is a shroud that represents the passion, the voluntary passion of Jesus Christ, God in the flesh, who comes to earth and suffers at the hands of his creation to pay a debt he didn't owe for a people who didn't deserve it. And he is the ram in the thicket caught by the horns that Abraham sacrificed in Isaac's place. He is the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world, as John the Baptist points. He is the suffering servant of Isaiah 53, who is disfigured and scarred, so that there was no ways we even wanted to look at him, because he was stricken and wounded for our transgressions. And he was assigned a grave with the rich, Joseph of Arimathea, but it was not God's will to see him decay, because not a bone of his would be broken, and he would not suffer decay, but would see the light of life, and becomes the source of it. This 700 years before this all happened. So these are the events that are woven into the scriptures, and now we have something physical to match it up against.
Yeah.
And we see, in fact, that what's written in scripture is fulfilled when we investigate the scientific events and the scientific qualities of this piece of cloth.
Well, it's all very fascinating.
And there's more. The Sudarium of Oviedo is another. It's a second cloth that in John's Gospel was put aside and noted to be put aside, separate from the burial cloth.
Okay.
And that's in Oviedo in Spain. And that's been there since the early 700s.
I hadn't even heard about that one.
So the Sudarium of Oviedo would be something we can talk about.
Well, there we go. We might stick to the shroud tonight and save that for another one, but it certainly is like, and there's more. There's more. Okay, well, let's watch our next video.
This face is derived from the Shroud of Turin, and I will outline why it is believed to be the authentic burial cloth of Jesus of Nazareth, bearing his image from a radiation burn. 1. Historical dating. Recent studies have dated the shroud to approximately 2,000 years ago, aligning with the era of Christ. 2. Radiation evidence. The blood on the shroud shows radiation markers, suggesting exposure to a brief but intense burst of high-energy radiation. Such technology was not available centuries ago, regardless of when you believe the cloth originated. 3. Medical accuracy. The blood is real, exudated blood, and the contracted thumbs, absent from the image, are consistent with crucifixion. Additionally, the presence of bilirubin and creatine supports the conclusion that this was a man who suffered crucifixion. Image properties. The image is superficial and cannot be reproduced by any known method, even with modern high-intensity laser technology, which still falls short of replicating the holographic quality observed. 5. Cultural authenticity. The man depicted shows characteristics consistent with a Nazarene and Semitic identity, differing from traditional depictions of Jesus in artwork throughout history.
All right, well, that is our last one then.
Fantastic.
So, finishing on the imaging, you were leading towards
Absolutely right.
the
Those
replication.
images actually are not fanciful. They have been calculated very carefully from the 3D information encoded on that image. This was discovered in 1976, where two researchers, I think Rogers and Jumper, who were both at the Los Alamos NASA program doing weapons testing, they put the image that sent to them of the photographs of the shroud into what's called a VP8 analyzer, and that was an analyzer which looked at the photographs of the moon to see the amount of 3D information in the flat photographs to give us an idea of altitude and height and 3D information, so that when you're picking a landing spot,
you can go,
you
I want to go.
need to know, you don't want to go to that crater because it's very steep.
I want to go to the tranquility
so they
spot.
found that if you subject normal photographs to VP8 analyzer, you get a mess. There's no 3D information coded into it.
Okay.
But if you take it of the shroud, the photograph of the shroud, the density emerges, giving you a 3D picture of a profile of a face. And this was fascinating, and this is what gave rise to the scientific is a Shroud of Turin research project, a group of scientists who go out and actually investigate it. They got permission from the cardinal who's in charge of the custodian of the Pope, the custodian of the shroud, and were allowed to go there for 120 hours and haul all their equipment, and had a lot of scientists.
I mentioned they are very, 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 very careful with what research they allow to take place and the methods.
Very much so, and it was all overseen with the stern eye of the custodians of the shroud. There's a confraternity that look after the shroud, and so they made sure that the shroud was very well preserved, and that how it was investigated was extremely carefully done. And that's all documented in all of the papers that have been written. Tangelo Gracia, who did the AI versions of showing Jesus as he probably would have looked at in real life, shows this Semitic kind of man at the age of about 30 or so, with a good muscular,
solid build,
5'11", and a beard, and the way he looked in that AI presentation. That's not to worship. That's just simply to reconstruct something which is plausible.
No, certainly not. No.
And the information that we have now adds more credibility to the biblical description of the things that happened at that time than raises questions about forgery.
I just think the way it's been explained and the amount of depth that you've gone into, and just sort of being able to react and respond to the various videos that we've seen here to be able to, to have a discussion video like this, points to an innumerable, well, it's not innumerable, you could always enumerate them, but the number of touch points, the number of things that have to align, just on a logical level, you know how hard it is to get your family together for Christmas, to get 5 or 6 things to happen at once, let alone the thousands of things that need to be there,
which all have to be
and
there.
technologies that don't even exist now.
Yeah. So to fake them, you would have had to have known in advance what we can prove now by scientific endeavor. And what's fascinating too is that the sudarium, which is the cloth that was put around Jesus' head when he was taken down from the cross. The reason being is because in Jewish burials, all parts of the person were important, including the blood that had been shed and lost. If anyone knows about this, there's a group of Jewish investigators, whenever there's a suicide bombing, who go and collect body parts so that the individuals can be buried. And they go around to protect them because that is important, part of Jewish burial practice. And that's been rabbinical, it's been in the Mishnahs, it's been in the teachings of the Jewish traditions. And they still do that to this day. So this was in keeping with the practice they had. So the sudarium was a cloth that went over Jesus' face.
And this is the one you said is in Spain or Portugal?
That's it's in Spain.
It's in Spain.
In the city of Oviedo at St. John. It's in the Cathedral of San Giovanni, I think it is. But the cloth was put around Jesus' face and has 127 points of congruence with the face on the Shroud of Turin. Now, in a court of law, if you have an image of an individual leaving a crime scene, and then you've got the individual in front of you who you suspect,
yes,
and you have got 35 or more points of congruence, that is a positive identification.
Yeah, okay.
And here, that's just 127 points of congruence on the head alone.
Wow.
Not the rest of the body. So does it detract from the veracity of the gospel accounts?
Well, so
or
now
does
this
it
is
augment them?
This is my question. This is what I want to bring this down to. So we sort of wrap this one up here. It's what do we make of this? And from my perspective, I'm still a non-educated recipient of a lot of other people's work. And humans can put a lot of work into a lot of different things. Certainly would be silly and ignorant to dismiss it and just go, well, as a Christian, we don't need these things. Well, look, in one instance, I will back that. As a Christian, we don't need the shroud.
I mean, for 1900 years, Christians from all over the world who gave up their lives for Jesus because of their encounters with him spiritually and how he has changed their lives, and they've gone to their deaths as martyrs all over the world for thousands of years, having never seen the shroud.
That's right. Shroud can come or go.
The
However,
shroud can come and go, but
it's here.
Is it not delicious in the economy of God, at a time where information and misinformation can be spread around the world in a second, with Starlink and with satellites and with connectivity?
Certainly not with Australia Post. They would take a lot longer to get things done.
No.
However, I'm with you.
Getting a South African passport, try that.
Don't do it. Just don't do it.
But we are left with an artifact where there is evidence. It demands a verdict. The verdict is it's fake or it's not fake.
Yes, it can only be binary. It can't be kind of fake. Is that a bit like being kind of pregnant? It doesn't happen.
Yeah,
there's no such category.
Nearly pregnant. Yeah,
nearly pregnant.
Yeah, sorry. It's a state. You're either alive or dead, or it's a binary.
I'm nearly dead.
So it's a fake or it's not a fake. And if it is a fake, we'll then prove how it was made. And there's £1 million. I think it is David Rolfe, the British filmmaker. He has put up a challenge. Anyone who can reproduce it will give you £1 million, and it's still untouched. And that's since the Stirp investigations done.
And what does
Some of
stand
the-
for again? Shroud of Turin.
Research Project.
Okay, STRP.
Yeah.
Right.
There have been very strong antagonists against its skeptics who have now, with the research that has come out, been converted. Ian Wilson from Ian Wilson, he's a Scottish writer. He's strongly written against it and now is a strong believer. The conversions are towards belief, not away from it, as the evidence accumulates.
How interesting.
And this now gives us as Christians a unique opportunity to say, whether you think it's a fake or not, the forger would have to want to pull the wool over your eyes and make this as close to the biblical story as possible. But without the technology we have today to prove it, and without the technology in the Middle Ages, in any way that we know, to do it.
Well, interestingly,
so therefore, if it is authentic, and that's the if, and Gary Habermas says he's 80% sure, if it is authentic, it's a powerful, living testimony to the truth of the written word in the gospel.
And that's the...
And if you can believe the things about Jesus' life, death, or suffering, crucifixion, death, and resurrection, that's the cornerstone of our faith. Because if the resurrection didn't occur, our faith is worthless. That's what Paul says. So therefore, if it did occur, and here's evidence of it, this bears more than just a passing glance. This bears
that's a good point.
Serious cogitation. If you want to really be a scientist, if you really want to be an art critic, if you really want to be a textile expert, if you really want to be a paint and metallurgical expert, if you want to be a laser scientist, an optics expert, prove it wrong.
Yeah. Look,
many have tried.
I think this is a really important point to come back to, and parking the shroud itself just for a moment. Christianity is evidence-based. It's never not been evidence-based. The Gospels, the Acts of the Apostles, the epistles, they're all evidence-based. Yes, they use and bring up, of course, the essentiality of faith and the different ways people can talk about faith and faith in things that we have seen, and also, faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see yet. There's those great dynamics around faith. Having said that, God calls us into his, to knowledge of him. God is not wanting in any way to stretch people to believe in flying pigs or mysterious spaghetti monsters in the sky. That's not what this is all about. This is saying God has intervened into the humanity and the world that he created by his very word, and he's given us his fingerprints all along the way. Possibly then the Shroud of Turin and the other document, the other artifact,
the Sudarium of Oviedo.
The Sudarium of Oviedo. What he said may just be those sort of fingerprints again that the early Christians had because they walked with Christ. Evidence enough.
But God has given us enough evidence of his presence, his existence, his history, his coming to the earth as Jesus. He's given us enough evidence to make faith reasonable.
Yes.
But he hasn't given us so much evidence to make faith indispensable. So, because without faith it's impossible to please God. The evidence that's put before us, at whatever level of intellectual capability we have, not everyone's going to be a professor of art. Not everyone's going to be a professor of excimer laserology. Not everyone's going to be a surgeon or a textile expert. But these are people who worship God with their minds in their fields of expertise. They bring their observations and their knowledge to the fore, and they give us reason to believe. They give us additional reason. Even Jesus himself said, you don't believe the words I say. At least believe in what you see.
So for me,
believe in the miracles you see. And some people would still, a priori, say, I choose not to believe this stuff.
Well, Romans 1.
Because I don't want to.
Yeah.
And the reason why I don't want to is because I like my sin.
Yeah.
And I wish to continue in sin, and I will find every possible irrational, crazy reason not to believe in the evidence that's put before me. This is not just me saying this. George Wilde, who was a Nobel Prize winner of 1957, wrote to a friend of his.
I know where this is going.
Saying,
I love this quote.
I think Richard Lewontin said the same
thing.
thing.
Can I lift it up? Can I do the object as you talk about it?
You can. That's it. And he said, confided to a friend of his, no matter how unscientific, unsupportable, or irrational our theory is, we have an a priori commitment to it because we cannot allow a divine foot in the door.
Love that quote.
We cannot allow a divine foot in the door. That smells to me as a scientist of the reek, stench of bias.
Yes.
And all of us know, if you do any research and bias creeps in, you're done.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry about my shoes there, but I do love that quote there, which is so telling. And I think for us, it's just another bit of the overwhelming evidence. And you can take the Shroud and park it and not come back to it, as millions of people who've never heard of it before, who were converted to Christ and are now going to be with us as brothers and sisters in heaven in eternity. You don't need the Shroud. Whichever
do us a favour, rather than doom scroll, how about doom scroll on the Shroud of Turin and go down that path and listen to what experts are saying about it. Make up your own mind.
Yeah, and it will maybe it'll reassure you. I found that journey myself.
Maybe it'll bring up questions, and I'll be happy to address you and point you in a direction to look for answers.
Harvey will answer all those questions in the chat. Hit him with it. Hit him with your rhythm stick, Ian Dury and the Blockheads. But in a lot of other, in a similar vein, I went through that journey from theistic evolution, Christian evolution, into biblical creationism, and it came with an evidence base. I'm embarrassed to say it came with an evidence base. Now I don't need the evidence. I wish I had believed that without needing the evidence to have moved me along that journey. But it did, and it's one of the things that I'm very grateful for, because my faith is so reassured and so sound, and I get to know that my faith is based on evidence that God's word is
true,
credible.
And I think what's very important is, at whatever level, whatever intellectual level, it's not the Gnostic or the Gnostic of the day, the scientist, who has higher knowledge that makes him any better than anyone else.
No.
There will always be enough need to worship God with your mind. There are some folk who know nothing about Excimer laser technology, nothing about a lot of the features that are discussed in the Shroud. And none of us is an expert in everything. But we will all be given enough evidence at whatever intellectual capacity we have. We'll have enough evidence for us to believe or not believe. And it may be harder for the rich man or the intelligent man or the scientist or whatever to enter the kingdom of heaven, because his rationality wants to block him.
Pride.
And he can try and explain his way out of things in order to avoid the consequences of acknowledging that God is God and God has jurisdiction over your life and life hereafter.
Yeah.
That's what people are trying to avoid. So if this can help you, commit your ways to Him. Lean not unto your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge Him. He will guide your path.
Amen.
That's Proverbs 3, verse 5 and 6.
My favourite. I think Dion wrote those in 1984. I'm kidding. That was a little musical joke there. Yeah, correct. But look, I think we might wrap it up there. Folks, thanks for joining us. Thank you, Harvey, for having done that study that was able to bring this commentary to life. And I do believe there's wonderful discussion and wonderful evidence there that if someone needs a bit of reassurance, and this can help in that way, then we're delighted about that. Just to reiterate, You certainly don't need the shroud to be saved. You don't even need to believe in it. I, for myself, am still holding it in a bit of Habermasian kind of open hand going, that is fascinating stuff. What am I to do with this? Well, you can work that out between you and God. If it helps, fantastic. I believe God has given enough, more than enough, fingerprints of evidence to prove him guilty of having jurisdiction over all of our lives and over the entire universe. So thanks for joining us. If you did like the video, please do give it a thumbs up. Any comments, put them down below. Harvey will get back to those because this really is his specialty and his topic. Was there anything else I needed to say? Subscribe if you're not subscribed. We'd appreciate that.
And share with your friends.
Share with your friends.
We want to open this discussion as far as we
Family and
can.
loved ones about this and other hot topics. And if you've got hot topics you want us to dig into, put those in the chat as well. We'll put those into a schedule and bit by bit we'll get there because we're all laymen, we're all part-time amateurs, specialists in other fields digging into these things. We're glad that you're here with us. Thank you very much. Harvey, thank you very much. And for now, we'll say God bless and sayonara.
God bless you.